I'm too fat, sir. The words tumbled out before Luna Mitchell could stop them. But I can cook. She stood on the weathered porch of the Colorado ranch house, her carpet bag clutched in trembling hands. Watching the tall rancher's expression shift from surprise to something she couldn't quite read. His eyes were blue, storm cloud blue, set in a face carved by wind and sun, and something harder, grief maybe. He didn't laugh. He didn't sneer. He just looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in 3 years, Lewis Thornton felt his heart stir with something other than emptiness. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 3 weeks earlier, Luna had been standing in a different doorway, in a railroad town 2 territories away. The boarding house owner, Mr. Garrett, had cornered her in the narrow hallway again, his whiskey breath hot on her neck, his hands reaching for her waist. She'd pushed past him, heart hammering, knowing she couldn't stay another day. Not another hour. The man thought her body was his for the taking simply because she worked for him, simply because she was alone in the world with nowhere else to go. Her husband, Daniel, had been dead 2 years. He'd been a good man, gentle and kind, who'd looked past what everyone else saw first. Her generous curves, her soft belly, her round face. He'd loved her, truly loved her, but a logging accident had taken him when she was only 28. He'd left behind debts she couldn't pay and a widow nobody wanted to hire. She was too fat for the dress shop, too fat to serve tables at the nice hotel, too visible for a town that preferred their women small and silent and easy to overlook. The advertisement had been crumpled in her pocket for 2 days before she worked up the courage to answer it. Rancher seeks housekeeper, Colorado territory. Room, board, fair wages. Must cook and manage household. Respond to L. Thornton, care of Leadville Post Office. She'd lied on her application, of course. Left out certain details. Exaggerated her experience. Made herself sound like the kind of woman a rancher might actually want working in his home. Efficient, invisible, sexless. The train west had been torture. Passengers stared. A thin woman had moved seats rather than sit beside her. 2 men had laughed behind their newspapers, loud enough for her to hear. The stagecoach from Leadville had been worse. Cramped quarters where every bump pressed her against strangers who shifted away as if her size were contagious. By the time the driver dropped her at the end of a long dirt road leading to the Thornton Ranch, Luna's courage had shriveled to almost nothing. She'd walked that last mile in the afternoon heat, dust coating her black traveling dress, her feet screaming in boots that pinched. The ranch house appeared gradually, small, weathered, sitting alone in a valley with mountains rising purple in the distance. Beautiful and isolated as she felt. There was a barn, a corral with a few horses, and a smaller building that must be the bunkhouse. But the main house looked neglected, like nobody had cared about it in years. Paint peeling, porch sagging slightly, windows that needed washing. Her carefully prepared speech had evaporated the moment the rancher opened the door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 38 or 40, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. Handsome in a hard, closed-off way. He'd looked at her standing there, all of her, the rounded hips and full bosom and soft arms, and she'd panicked. Better to say it first before he could. Better to name the thing that made her unacceptable before she could be rejected for it. I'm too fat, sir, but I can cook. For a long moment he just stared. Then something in his expression softened, just a fraction. I'm Lewis Thornton, he said quietly. You must be Miss Mitchell. Come inside. The house was worse than she'd imagined. Not dirty in a disgusting way, but neglected, joyless, like a place where someone existed but didn't live. The front room had furniture covered in dust. The kitchen, the kitchen was a bachelor's nightmare. Dishes stacked unwashed, a stove that hadn't been properly cleaned in months, cupboards in chaos. This was a house without a woman's touch, without anyone who cared enough to make it a home. My wife died 3 years ago, Lewis said from the doorway, his voice flat. Childbirth. I've been managing on my own since then. He cleared his throat. I have 2 ranch hands who eat in the bunkhouse. I eat here, alone. Luna's heart twisted. She recognized that tone. The sound of someone who'd stopped hoping for anything better. I can give you a week's trial, he continued, still not quite meeting her eyes. You'll cook, clean, manage the household. I'll pay fair wages. If it works out, the position is permanent. If not, he shrugged. No hard feelings either way. That's more than fair, Mr. Thornton. Luna set down her carpet bag, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll do my best. He nodded and left her there, his boots heavy on the wooden floor as he walked back outside. Through the window, she watched him cross to the barn, his shoulders tight with tension. He disappeared into the shadows, and Luna turned to survey her new kingdom. This sad, neglected kitchen that smelled of old coffee and loneliness. 1 week. She had 1 week to prove she was worth keeping. 1 week to convince him that what she lacked in appearance, she could make up for incompetence. 1 week to save her own life, because going back to that boarding house, to that town, to that man with grabbing hands, that wasn't an option. This was her last chance. She rolled up her sleeves and started taking inventory. Flour, sugar, salt. The basics were here at least. Some dried beans, a few cans of vegetables, a slab of bacon. Not much to work with, but she'd managed with less. Tomorrow she'd show him what she could do. Tomorrow she'd make him a breakfast he wouldn't forget. 1 week to save my life, she whispered to the empty kitchen. In the barn, Lewis Thornton leaned against the stall door, one hand pressed to his chest. Something ached there, something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not since the night Margaret died, her blood on his hands, her last breath rattling in the bedroom they'd shared. He'd locked his heart away that night, sealed it shut, promised himself he'd never feel anything again, feeling hurt too much. So why now? Why? When that round-faced woman with frightened eyes had stood on his porch and called herself too fat, had something cracked open inside him. Why had her words, "But I can cook," sounded less like a qualification and more like a plea? And why? God help him. Did he want to go back to the house and tell her she didn't have to prove anything, that she could stay as long as she needed, that maybe they were both exactly as broken and desperate as each other? He didn't go back. Instead, he stayed in the barn until dark, listening to the horses shift and breathe, trying to convince himself that nothing had changed. But it had. He knew it had. And it terrified him. Luna woke at 4 in the morning, her body protesting from the unfamiliar mattress in the small room off the kitchen. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The ranch, the trial week, everything riding on what happened next. She dressed quickly in the darkness, pinned up her hair, and made her way to the kitchen by lamplight. The stove fought her at first, but she coaxed it to life, feeding it kindling until the firebox glowed warm. While it heated, she explored the cupboards more thoroughly than she'd managed last night. The flour was decent quality. The eggs in the cold box were fresh enough. She found a jar of wild berry preserves pushed to the back of a shelf, dusty but still good. Her mind started working, planning, calculating. She could make this work. By 5:30, the kitchen smelled like heaven. Fresh bread was rising near the warm stove. Bacon sizzled in the pan, filling the air with its salty promise. She'd found coffee beans and ground them properly, not the lazy, coarse grind she'd seen evidence of before. The eggs were ready to cook the moment she heard footsteps. Everything was timing, and timing was something Luna understood. The bunkhouse door slammed around 6. Male voices, rough with sleep, grew louder as they approached. 2 ranch hands appeared at the kitchen door. One older with a gray beard, one younger with a crooked nose that had been broken at least once. They stopped dead when they saw the table. "Sweet Jesus," the older one breathed. "Is that actual food?" "I'm Buck," he added quickly, snatching his hat off. "This here's Tom. We're the hands. And we ain't seen a spread like this since Mrs. Thornton passed. God rest her." Luna smiled, some of her nervousness easing. "Sit down, please. It's ready." She served them eggs cooked in bacon fat, the yolks still soft, thick slices of bread with butter and preserves, bacon that was crispy but not burned, and coffee, real coffee that actually tasted like coffee. The two men ate like they'd been starving, and maybe they had been, in a way. A body could only survive so long on beans and burnt biscuits. Lewis came in last. She heard his boots on the porch, the pause before he opened the door, like he was bracing himself. When he stepped into the kitchen, he froze. His nostrils flared slightly, taking in the smell of fresh bread and coffee. His eyes swept the clean table, the organized counter, the woman standing by the stove with a plate ready for him. "Good morning, Mr. Thornton," Luna said quietly. "Please sit." He sat slowly, like a man in a dream. She set the plate before him. The same meal she'd given the hands, but she'd taken extra care with his eggs, and she'd added a thick slice of ham she'd found hanging in the cold box. His fork hesitated over the plate. Then he took a bite of the eggs. His eyes closed. His jaw worked slowly, and Luna saw his throat move as he swallowed. When he opened his eyes again, they were bright with something that might have been tears. He stopped, started again. Margaret used to. He couldn't finish. Just shook his head and took another bite, this time of the bread. His shoulders dropped slightly, tension releasing that Luna hadn't even known he was carrying. Buck and Tom exchanged glances. They'd seen it too. Their boss, the man who'd been stone-faced for 3 years, nearly breaking over a plate of breakfast. Luna turned back to the stove, giving him privacy, her heart hammering. She'd done it. The first test passed. But watching his grief surface, raw and unexpected, made her realize this job was about more than cooking. This house needed healing, and she wasn't sure she knew how to provide that. The second day, she tackled the rest of the kitchen, scrubbed every surface until they shone, organized the cupboards so things made sense, found cleaning supplies in a shed, and went after the floors, the windows, the corners where dust had gathered into small drifts. Her back ached by noon, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Every clean surface was proof of her value. Every organized shelf was an argument for keeping her. The third day, she started on the laundry. Mountains of it. Shirts, pants, linens that hadn't been properly washed in who knew how long. She hauled water, heated it, scrubbed until her knuckles were raw, hung everything on the line behind the house where the wind could catch it. By evening, she was mending buttons that had been hanging by threads, hems that had come loose, a tear in Lewis's work shirt that she patched carefully. That's when it happened. She was reaching for a high shelf in the kitchen, trying to put away a serving platter, standing on her toes, but still not quite tall enough. Her fingers brushed the edge of the shelf, but couldn't get purchase. Suddenly, he was behind her. She hadn't heard him come in. His presence was warm, solid. And then his hands were on her waist, steadying her, lifting her slightly so she could slide the platter into place. Tom stopped. His hands were large, his grip firm but gentle, and they spanned her waist. Her thick waist that she'd always hated, that men had always mocked or ignored or grabbed with cruel intent. But his touch was different, respectful, almost reverent. She could feel the heat of him through her dress, could smell soap and leather and something else, something essentially male. "There," he said quietly, his voice close to her ear. "Got it." He didn't let go immediately. For a heartbeat, maybe two, his hands stayed where they were, and Luna couldn't breathe. Then he stepped back, and cool air rushed in where his warmth had been. She turned, expecting to see mockery or disgust, or that particular cruelty men got in their eyes when they touched a fat woman. Instead, she saw something like wonder and confusion, as if he'd surprised himself. "Thank you," she managed. He nodded and left, but that night, after dinner, he didn't disappear to the barn like he had the previous evenings. Instead, he lingered, picked up a dish towel, started drying the plates she'd washed. They worked in silence at first, the only sounds the splash of water and the clink of dishes. Then he asked about the weather back east, where she'd come from. She told him about the railroad town, keeping it vague, keeping it safe. He told her about the ranch, about the hard winter they'd had, about the cattle he was hoping to sell in the fall. It was nothing really, just talk. But it was the first real conversation they'd had. And when she made a small joke about the sorry state his kitchen had been in, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Closer than he'd come to smiling since she'd arrived. On the fifth day, Buck made a comment. She was serving lunch, moving between the table and the stove, and he'd been watching her, that assessing way men had. "You move real nice for a big gal," he said, not unkindly, just observing. "Most women your size, they're clumsy like. You got grace." Tom kicked him under the table. "Jesus, Buck, you can't just." But Lewis stood so fast his chair scraped hard against the floor. His face had gone dark, his jaw tight. "You will speak to Miss Mitchell with respect, or you'll find work elsewhere. Are we clear?" Buck's eyes went wide. "Boss, I didn't mean nothing by it. I was saying she. Are we clear?" Lewis's voice was cold steel. "Clear as glass, boss. I apologize, Miss Mitchell. Truly." Luna stood frozen by the stove, her face hot, her hands trembling slightly. She'd been braced for the comment. She always was, but she hadn't expected Lewis to defend her. Men didn't defend her. They laughed along, or stayed silent, or said worse things themselves. But Lewis had stood up for her like it was the most natural thing in the world, like her dignity mattered, like she mattered. That evening, they found themselves on the porch as the sun set. It was becoming a routine. Her finishing the dishes, him appearing from wherever he'd been working, both of them drawn to the quiet evening air. They sat in the two old rocking chairs that had probably been there since his wife's time, watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light. "Why did you say that?" he asked suddenly. "When you first arrived, that you were too fat." Luna's hands tightened in her lap. "Because I am. Because that's what people see first. Always. I thought if I said it myself, it would hurt less when you said it. And people have said it? Often. My whole life, Mr. Thornton." Her voice was steady, but it cost her. "I've been too fat for every job, every dress, every room I walk into. People look at me and see someone who's too much. Takes up too much space, eats too much food, wants too much grace from a world that only has patience for small women who don't ask for anything." She could feel his eyes on her profile, but she kept staring at the mountains. "It was easier that way. My husband, Daniel, he was different. He was kind. Saw past it somehow. But he died 2 years ago in a logging accident, and I've been alone since then. Trying to find work, trying to find somewhere safe. The boarding house where I worked, the owner..." She stopped, not wanting to say it out loud. "He hurt you." Lewis's voice had gone quiet and dangerous. "He tried. That's why I left. That's why I answered your advertisement. I had nowhere else to go, Mr. Thornton. No family, no friends, no options. This was my last chance." The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with something she couldn't name. "I see a woman who brings life wherever she goes, who took a dead house and made it warm again, who works harder than any 2 men I know, who has grace, real grace, not the kind Buck was talking about, but the kind that matters, the kind that makes broken things feel like they might heal." Luna's eyes burned. She turned her face away, blinking hard. "You don't have to say things like that. I'm not a man who says things I don't mean." He stood then, slowly, and she heard his boots on the porch boards. But he didn't go inside. Instead, he sat back down, and they stayed there in silence as the stars came out. He didn't push her to talk more, didn't ask for anything. Just sat with her, solid and steady. And for the first time in years, Luna felt like maybe she could stop running. Maybe she could rest. Day 6 dawned cool and clear. One day left in her trial week. Luna had been counting, of course. Counting every hour, every moment, wondering if she'd done enough. She cooked an elaborate dinner. Roast chicken with herbs, potatoes done 3 different ways, fresh bread, and an apple pie made from preserves and dried fruit she'd reconstituted. It was the kind of meal that said, "Please let me stay. Please don't send me away." Lewis had been quiet all day, more distant than he'd been since that second evening. She'd seen him watching her through the window, seen him start toward the house, then turn back. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. Had she done something wrong? Said too much last night on the porch? Was he regretting his kindness? After dinner, after the dishes were done, he asked her to sit at the table. His face was serious, almost grim, and Luna's heart plummeted. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his hands flat on the table between them. "I need to speak with you about your future here." She couldn't breathe. This was it, the rejection she'd been waiting for. She'd known, hadn't she? Known it was too good to be true. Known that men like him didn't keep women like her around. "Mr. Thornton," she started, her voice shaking. "I understand if. I want you to stay." The words landed between them like stones dropped in still water. Luna stared at him, not sure she'd heard correctly. "I want you to stay," he repeated, and now she could see he was nervous, his jaw working, his fingers tapping once against the table. "Permanently. As my housekeeper. Good wages, respectability, security. Everything we discussed, but ongoing. If you're willing." Relief flooded through her so fast she felt dizzy. "Yes. Yes, Mr. Thornton, I'll stay." Something flickered in his eyes. Was that disappointment? But it was gone before she could be sure. He nodded once, decisive, and took a breath like a man about to jump off a cliff. "There's a town social next week. Would you accompany me?" Luna's mouth opened, but no sound came out. A social? With him, where everyone could see them together. "As my guest," he clarified, and now his eyes were steady on hers. "If you're willing." Was this courting? Or was it duty? The boss being kind to his new employee? She couldn't tell, didn't dare hope, but her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. She swallowed. "Yes, I'd be honored." He nodded again, but he didn't smile, didn't give anything away. Just stood and said goodnight, and left her sitting at the table, wondering what in God's name had just happened, and whether she'd just agreed to the best thing in her life or a humiliation she couldn't even imagine yet. The week between his invitation and the town social stretched out like taffy, each day longer than the last. Luna moved through her work in a fog of anticipation and dread. She had one decent dress, the same black traveling dress she'd arrived in, and when she tried on in her small room, she wanted to cry. It was too tight across the bust, strained at the seams around her hips, and made her look exactly like what she was, a poor woman trying to make do with clothes that didn't fit. She was folding it away, resigned to her humiliation, when Lewis appeared in the kitchen doorway that evening. He held a package wrapped in brown paper, and his face had that uncertain look she was starting to recognize, like a man who wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing but was going to do it anyway. "I was in town today," he said, setting the package on the table. "Thought you might need this. For the social. If you'd like." Luna stared at the package, then at him. "Mr. Thornton, I can't accept. It's fabric, Miss Mitchell. Just fabric. And maybe some thread. Notice you're handy with a needle." He was already backing toward the door, uncomfortable with her potential refusal. "No obligation. But if you wanted to make something new, well, you'd have time." He was gone before she could protest further. Luna unwrapped the package with trembling hands. Inside was beautiful fabric, a deep blue cotton, soft and good quality, far better than anything she could have afforded herself. Underneath was thread, buttons, even a paper pattern for a simple but elegant dress. He must have asked the shopkeeper for help. The image of this gruff rancher standing in a mercantile trying to pick out dress fabric made her throat tight. That night, she started cutting the pattern. The next evening, she sewed by lamplight at the kitchen table. Lewis found reasons to be nearby, fixing a cabinet hinge, oiling a squeaky door, checking the stove damper. He didn't hover, exactly, but he was there, present in a way that felt deliberate. On the third night, he poured himself coffee and sat across from her, just watching her hands work. "I'm afraid," she said suddenly, not looking up from her stitching. About the social, about what people will say. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they'll be talking about. They'll talk about both of us. His voice was matter of fact. Town's been trying to marry me off for 3 years. Every widow, every spinster daughter, every woman who thinks she can fix a broken man. They'll have opinions about you, about us, about everything. Luna's needle paused. Is that what this is? You trying to get them to stop matchmaking? No. The word was firm, almost sharp. That's not what this is. She looked up then, met his eyes across the table. They were storm blue in the lamplight, intense and uncertain at the same time. Then what is it? He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. I know what I see, Luna. Her given name in his mouth sent heat through her chest. I see a woman who makes dead things come alive, who works until her hands are raw, who's stronger than anyone I've ever met. That's what I see. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Luna's hands had stilled completely on her sewing. Louis leaned forward slightly, and she thought, was he going to kiss her? Did she want him to? Yes, God help her, yes. But fear crashed over her like a wave. Fear that she was misreading everything. Fear that she wasn't enough. Fear that this fragile thing between them would shatter if she reached for it. She pulled back, dropping her eyes to her sewing. I should finish this. It's getting late. She felt rather than saw his disappointment, but he didn't push. Just stood, set his cup in the sink, and paused at the doorway. I'm a patient man, Luna. I can wait. For what? She wanted to ask, but he was already gone, and she was left alone with her racing heart and half-finished dress. Saturday arrived too fast and not fast enough. Luna had finished the dress the night before, and it fit better than anything she'd worn in years. The blue fabric brought out color in her face, and she'd made it with a fitted bodice and full skirt that didn't hide her size, but somehow made it seem intentional, graceful. She'd pinned up her hair carefully, allowing a few soft curls to frame her face. Looking in the small mirror in her room, she almost looked pretty. Almost. The wagon ride into town was torture of a different kind. Louis sat beside her on the bench seat, and every bump in the road pressed his thigh against hers. He dressed carefully too. Clean shirt, vest, his good hat. He smelled like soap and leather and something spicy she couldn't name. His hands on the reins were steady, capable, and she found herself watching them, remembering how they'd felt on her waist that day in the kitchen. You look beautiful, he said quietly, not looking at her, his eyes on the road ahead. You don't have to. I don't say things I don't mean. It was becoming his refrain, and every time he said it, she believed him a little more. The town came into view, a single main street with false front buildings, a church at one end, a saloon at the other. The social was being held in the town hall, and they could hear music already, fiddles warming up. Several wagons were already parked outside, families gathering, women in their best dresses clustering together like birds. As Louis helped Luna down from the wagon, every head turned. The staring was immediate and absolute. Women whispered behind their hands. Men's eyes traveled up and down Luna's body with that assessing look she knew too well. She wanted to climb back in the wagon, wanted to disappear, but Louis's hand was firm on her elbow, guiding her forward. They were halfway to the door when a woman intercepted them. She was perhaps 48, handsome in a sharp way, wearing an expensive dress that probably came from Denver. Her smile was bright and completely false. Louis Thornton, she said warmly, ignoring Luna entirely. How wonderful to see you at a social event. It's been far too long. Evelyn. Louis's voice was polite but cool. May I introduce Miss Luna Mitchell, my housekeeper? The way he emphasized the last word made it clear he was establishing boundaries. But Evelyn Hartwell's eyes had already done their assessment and found Luna wanting. How practical of you, Louis. Her gaze traveled deliberately down Luna's dress, lingering on where the fabric strained slightly across her bust. Though I must say, that's a lovely dress. Custom-made, I assume? So difficult to find ready-made clothing in certain sizes. The cut landed exactly as intended. Luna felt her face burn. Lewis's hand tightened on her elbow, and she could feel the anger radiating off him. But Evelyn wasn't finished. Of course, having a woman alone at a ranch with unmarried men, well. She laughed lightly. I'm sure there's nothing improper happening. Though people do talk, don't they? Small towns are so dreadfully concerned with appearances. Luna wanted to die, wanted the ground to open up and swallow her. She'd known this would happen, known she'd be judged and found lacking. But having it happen so immediately, so publicly, was worse than she'd imagined. She started to pull away, ready to flee back to the wagon, but Lewis moved. He took her hand, not her elbow, not a polite guiding touch, but her actual hand, his fingers lacing through hers in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate, unmistakably claiming. The whole town was watching. Luna's breath caught. If you'll excuse us, Evelyn, Lewis said, his voice pleasant but with steel underneath. I promised Miss Mitchell the first dance. He led her through the crowd, which parted like water, everyone staring, everyone whispering. Luna's face was on fire, her hand trembling in his. Lewis, I can't. I don't. I'm too heavy, too awkward. I'll step on your feet, They'd reached the dance floor. The fiddle music was playing something slow and sweet. Lewis turned to face her, his hands moving to proper waltz position, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. His eyes were level with hers, serious and intent. Let me decide what I can handle, he said quietly. People are watching. They're going to talk about. Good. Let them watch. He pulled her closer, began to move, and she had no choice but to follow. His lead was confident, strong, and somehow her body knew what to do, even though her mind was screaming that this was a mistake. They moved together across the floor, and the room had gone silent except for the music. Everyone was watching. Everyone. You're beautiful, Luna, he said, his voice low, meant only for her. I'm not. You're beautiful, he repeated, more firmly. And I'm going to spend my life proving it to you, if you'll let me. Luna stumbled, and his arms tightened to keep her steady. Lewis? What are you? I'm courting you, he said clearly, loudly enough that the people nearest them could hear. The whole town can know it. I'm courting Luna Mitchell. I don't give a damn what anyone thinks about it. Her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't help it. You don't mean that. You can't. I don't say things I don't mean. His hand at her waist pressed gently, keeping her close, keeping her moving. I'm courting you, Luna. Say yes. The world had narrowed to just his face, just his eyes, just the feeling of his hands on her body like she was something precious. Around them, the whispers had started again, but quieter now, uncertain. Some of the voices sounded almost approving. She opened her mouth to answer him, to say yes or ask him if he was sure, or maybe just to tell him he was crazy. But before she could speak, there was a commotion at the door. Fire, someone shouted. Fire at the Miller Ranch. The music stopped. The dancing stopped. Everyone turned toward the door where a young man stood, out of breath and wild-eyed. Barnes fully caught. They need every hand. The room erupted into motion. Men grabbing hats, women calling the children, organized chaos taking over. Lewis's hands dropped from Luna's waist, his face already shifting into action mode. I have to go. I'm sorry, I'm coming with you, Luna said firmly. Luna, it's dangerous. The smoke, I can cook. They'll need feeding. All those men working through the night, they'll need coffee and food. And she grabbed his arm. Urgent. I can help, Lewis. Let me help. He looked at her for one long moment, something like pride flickering across his face. And he nodded sharply. Come on, then. We'll take our wagon. They ran for it together, her hands still in his, the whole town streaming out behind them. In the distance, an orange glow lit up the night sky, and Luna felt her heart hammering with fear and purpose both. Whatever was happening between them Whatever he'd just declare on that dance floor would have to wait. Right now, people needed help, and Luna Mitchell knew how to help. The Miller Ranch was chaos when they arrived. Flames shot from the barn roof into the black sky, sparks spinning up like angry fireflies. Men were already forming bucket lines from the well, shouting orders, faces streaked with soot and sweat. Women herded children away from the heat, their faces tight with fear. The Millers had lost a barn 2 years ago. Everyone remembered. They couldn't afford to lose another. Lewis jumped from the wagon before it fully stopped, already running toward the flames. Luna climbed down more carefully, her eyes scanning the scene. Mrs. Miller stood near the house, holding a baby, her face blank with shock. 3 other women clustered nearby, whispering, useless. Luna didn't hesitate. She marched straight to Mrs. Miller. "Ma'am, I need your kitchen. I'm going to feed everyone working that fire line. Can you show me what you have?" Mrs. Miller blinked, focused on Luna like she was seeing her for the first time. "Ah, yes. Yes, come inside." The kitchen was smaller than Lewis's, but well-stocked. Luna took command immediately, the same way she'd run the boarding house kitchen back east. "You," she pointed to one of the whispering women. "I need every pot filled with water and heating. You, find me coffee, as much as you have. And you," she turned to the third woman, "start slicing bread. Thick slices. We'll make sandwiches." For a moment, nobody moved. They were looking at her like they didn't know whether to obey this strange fat woman who'd shown up with Lewis Thornton. Then Mrs. Miller said quietly, "Do what she says. Please." The kitchen erupted into motion. Luna worked like a machine, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Coffee brewing in every available pot. Sandwiches assembled production line style. She found a huge pot and started stew. It would take hours, but the men would need hot food by dawn. Her back ached within an hour, her feet screaming in her good shoes, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Every 30 minutes, she loaded a tray and carried it out to the fire line herself. The men grabbed food without looking, their attention on the flames, on the bucket line, on saving what could be saved. She saw Lewis twice, his face black with soot, his shirt soaked with sweat and water. Their eyes met briefly each time, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, respect, connection. More women arrived as word spread. Luna organized them too, putting them to work without asking permission. Even Evelyn Hartwell showed up, overdressed and horrified by the mess. But when Luna handed her a knife and a loaf of bread, she took it. They worked in tense silence, but they worked. The night stretched on forever. Luna's hands cramped from slicing bread. Her shoulders burned from carrying heavy trays. Her ankles swelled in her shoes until each step was agony. Around 3 in the morning, one of the other women said, "You should rest. You've been going nonstop." "So have the men," Luna replied, loading another tray. By dawn, the fire was contained. The barn was a total loss, just smoking timbers and ash, but it hadn't spread to the house or other outbuildings. The Miller family would survive this. Exhausted men stumbled away from the ruins, faces haggard, hands blistered. Luna had stew ready, hot and thick, and fresh coffee that actually tasted like something worth drinking. She was ladling stew into bowls, moving on pure determination now, because her body had given up an hour ago when the world suddenly tilted sideways. The ladle clattered to the ground. Her vision went white at the edges, then gray, then black. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. She heard Lewis's voice, sharp with panic. "Luna, someone get the doctor. Move." She tried to tell him she was fine, just tired, but her tongue wouldn't work. The world was spinning, and she was being lifted, cradled against a chest that smelled like smoke and sweat and safety. She felt the wagon moving, heard his voice talking to her, urgent and afraid, but the words wouldn't arrange themselves into meaning. "Did I do enough?" she mumbled, not sure if the words came out. "Did I prove worthy?" His answer came from very far away, or maybe very close, she couldn't tell. You proved I could love again. Then darkness took her completely, and she knew nothing more. Luna woke to afternoon sunlight slanting through unfamiliar curtains. Her own curtains, her own room. She was in her bed at the ranch, still wearing her blue dress, now wrinkled and stained with soot and grease. Her head pounded, her mouth was dry as desert sand, and every muscle in her body screamed in protest when she tried to sit up. Don't. Lewis's voice, rough and exhausted. He was sitting in a chair beside her bed, and he looked terrible, unshaven, his shirt still filthy from the fire, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. Doc said you need rest. Exhaustion, dehydration. Nothing serious, but you scared the hell out of me. How long? 16 hours. You've been out 16 hours. His hands were clasped between his knees, knuckles white. Doc examined you, said you'd be fine with rest and water. But Luna, you can't do that again. Work yourself to collapse. I thought, his voice cracked. I thought I'd lost you. Luna stared at him. His hair was standing up like he'd been running his hands through it. There was a coffee cup on the floor by his chair, empty. Had he been sitting there the whole time? Lewis, I'm fine. I just overdid it a little. A little. He stood abruptly, paced to the window, his shoulders rigid. You collapsed. Went down like someone shot you. And all I could think was that 3 years ago, I held my wife while she died, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. And last night I was holding you, and you weren't waking up, and He stopped, his back to her, one hand braced against the window frame. Lewis. Her voice was soft. I'm not her. I'm not dying. I know that. He turned, and his face was raw with something she'd never seen before. Fear and longing and desperate honesty. I know that. But it made me realize I can't keep pretending. Can't keep telling myself this is just convenient. That you're just my housekeeper. That what I feel is just gratitude. Her heart was hammering now, hard enough to hurt. What do you feel? He crossed back to the bed, dropped to his knees beside it, so they were eye level. His hands reached for hers, covered them completely. I love you, Luna. I'm terrified to say it, terrified to feel it, but I do. I love you. And when you collapsed, all I could think was that I'd wasted days, weeks pretending I didn't. Dancing around it. Being careful. His grip tightened. I don't want to be careful anymore. Tears spilled down Luna's cheeks. You don't mean that. You're just scared because of last night, because... I mean it. His voice was fierce now. I love your strength. I love how you take charge of crisis without asking permission. I love how you make my house feel like a home. I love your laugh when you think no one's listening. I love, he stopped, swallowed hard. I love your body, Luna. The softness of you. The curves. The way you feel when I put my hands on your waist. I love all of it. Lewis, stop. She was crying harder now, ugly crying, her nose running. You don't have to say these things. Yes, I do. Because you don't believe them. You think you're not worthy of love because some jackass told you that you take up too much space. But Luna, you're wrong. You're so wrong. He brought her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Marry me. Make this permanent. Make me your husband. Let me spend the rest of my life proving to you what I see when I look at you. I can't have children. The words burst out of her, desperate, necessary. There was an illness when I was young. The doctor said I'm damaged inside. I can't give you babies, Lewis. I can't give you an heir for this ranch. My husband knew, and he loved me anyway, but you deserve to know before. Stop. His voice cut through her panic. To stop, Luna. I lost Margaret and our baby in one night. She bled to death in our bed while I held her, helpless. Our son never took a breath. Do you understand? I'm terrified of pregnancy, terrified of losing someone that way again. If you're telling me marriage to you means I never have to watch another woman I love die in childbirth. His voice broke. That's not a burden. That's a blessing. Luna stared at him through her tears. You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. He smiled then, watery and real. Marry me, Luna Mitchell. Please. Yes. The word came out as a sob. Yes, Lewis. Yes. He surged up, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her against his chest. She buried her face in his smoky shirt and cried while he held her, rocking slightly, his hand stroking her hair. When she finally pulled back, he cupped her face in both hands and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she'd break. Then deeper, more certain, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that made her gasp. She kissed him back with everything she had, tasting smoke and salt and promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Soon, he said, we'll marry soon. I'm not waiting. Neither am I, she whispered back, and kissed him again. They set the date for 3 weeks out, just enough time to arrange things properly. Lewis said, though Luna suspected he'd have married her the next day if the preacher had been available. The announcement went into the town newspaper, a simple notice that Lewis Thornton would wed Luna Mitchell on the 15th of the month at the community church. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some folks were genuinely happy. The Miller family came by with preserves and congratulations, thanking Luna again for her help during the fire. Several ranch wives she'd worked beside that night stopped her in the mercantile with warm words and knowing smiles. But others weren't so kind. Evelyn Hartwell made sure her opinions were heard throughout town. Luna was a gold digger, obviously, trapped poor Lewis with her cooking and her feminine wiles. It was unseemly how fast this was happening. And really, what kind of man chose a woman like that when he could have his pick of respectable ladies? The whispers followed Luna every time she went to town, and though she tried to ignore them, they burrowed under her skin like splinters. One afternoon, standing in front of the dry goods store while 2 women deliberately turned their backs on her, Luna felt the old shame creeping back. That night, sitting across from Lewis at dinner, she put down her fork. Maybe we're rushing this, she said quietly. Maybe we should wait. Give people time to get used to the idea. Lewis's jaw tightened. No, but the talk, Lewis. They're saying terrible things about both of us. About me trapping you. About you settling for... For what? His voice was sharp. For the best thing that's happened to me in 3 years? For the woman who brought my house back to life? For someone who makes me want to wake up in the morning? He reached across the table, caught her hand. I don't care what they say, Luna. I know what I want. And I want you. But Luna couldn't quite shake the doubt. Late at night, alone in her room, she'd press her hands against her soft belly and wonder if he'd regret this. If one day he'd look at her and wish he'd chosen someone smaller, prettier, more acceptable. The wedding dress became her next crisis. She wanted to be beautiful for him, wanted to walk down that aisle and have him see her as something other than practical, capable Luna. But when she went to the town's seamstress, the woman looked her up and down with barely concealed distaste. I'm very busy right now, she said, though her shop was clearly empty. And dresses in your size require extra fabric, extra time. I'm not sure I could manage it before your wedding date. Luna left without arguing, her face burning. That evening, she spread out fabric on the kitchen table, plain white cotton she'd bought at the mercantile, and started cutting a simple pattern. If no one else would make her a wedding dress, she'd make her own. At least then it would fit properly. Lewis found her sewing 2 nights later, her eyes tired in the lamplight. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her work. Then, quietly, you shouldn't have to make your own wedding dress. It's fine. I like sewing. It's not fine. He pulled out a chair, sat heavily. That seamstress refused you, didn't she? Because of your size. Luna's needle paused. She was busy. She's never busy. Her shop sits empty half the week. His hands curled into fists on the table. Luna, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this town is full of small-minded people who can't see past. It's what I'm used to, Lewis. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but it hurt to say. This is how the world treats women like me. I've learned not to expect different. Well, I expect different. He stood, agitated. You deserve different. You deserve people treating you with basic human decency. You deserve a proper wedding dress from a real seamstress. And you deserve to walk into that church with your head high, knowing you're the most beautiful woman there. I'll never be the most beautiful woman anywhere. The words slipped out before she could stop them, small and honest and sad. Lewis moved around the table, pulled her to her feet, his hands on her shoulders. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And on our wedding day, I'm going to prove it to you. The ranch hands, Buck and Tom, appointed themselves her unofficial protectors. When they heard about the seamstress, Buck made a point of loudly mentioning in the saloon that any man who disrespected the future Mrs. Thornton would answer to him personally. Tom started tipping his hat extra politely whenever they passed Luna, making sure everyone in town noticed. You don't have to do that, Luna told them, embarrassed. Yes, ma'am, we do, Buck replied seriously. Boss is happier than we've seen him in years. You did that. Least we can do is make sure folks show proper respect. Their loyalty touched her more than she could say. These rough cowboys who barely knew her were defending her honor like she was family. Maybe she thought, maybe this could work. Maybe she could belong here. The wedding dress came together slowly. She worked on it every evening, Lewis often sitting nearby, reading or just watching her. Sometimes he'd reach over and touch her hand, or tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, small gestures of affection that she was learning to accept. The dress was simple, cream-colored with a fitted bodice and full skirt. But she made it with care, every stitch a prayer that this was real, that he meant what he said, that she could actually be someone's wife again. A week before the wedding, doubt crept back in. What if no one came? What if she walked into that church, and it was empty except for Lewis and the preacher? What if this whole town rejected them publicly, irrevocably? What if it's just us? She asked Lewis that night on the porch, their evening ritual. Then it's just us, he said simply. You, me, and the preacher. That's all we need. You deserve better than a wife the whole town gossips about. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the twilight. Luna Mitchell, you listen to me. I don't give a damn what this town thinks. I only care what you think. Do you want to marry me? Yes, she whispered. More than anything. Then that's all that matters. The morning of the wedding, Luna woke before dawn with her stomach in knots. She dressed carefully in her cream-colored dress, the fabric soft against her skin. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair, leaving a few curls loose the way Lewis liked. She'd made a simple bouquet from wildflowers Buck had picked for her, purple lupins and yellow columbines from the mountain meadow. In a small mirror, she looked almost pretty. Almost. The church was a mile from the ranch. Lewis had offered to ride with her, but she'd insisted on tradition. He shouldn't see her before the ceremony. So Buck drove her in a wagon, freshly washed and decorated with ribbons Tom had scrounged from somewhere. Both men wore clean shirts and looked uncomfortable in their Sunday best. You look real nice, ma'am, Tom said shyly as he helped her down. Like a princess, Buck added, then colored red at his own sentimentality. Luna's heart was hammering as she approached the church door. She could hear the murmur of voices inside. Some voices, but how many? She paused on the steps, gripping her bouquet too tight, suddenly terrified. What if it was empty? What if Lewis was standing there alone, humiliated by her inadequacy? Buck must have seen her fear. Go on, ma'am. Trust me. She pushed open the door. The church was full. Not packed, but full. Real people in the pews turned to watch her enter. The Miller family in the front row, all 6 children scrubbed clean. The ranch wives from the fire, smiling at her. Several shopkeepers from town. Even a few families she didn't recognize, come out of simple kindness or curiosity. Her eyes filled with tears. They'd come. People had actually come. Then she saw Lewis at the altar, and everything else disappeared. He wore his only suit, brushed clean, and his hair was neatly combed. But it was his face that stopped her heart, the way he looked at her as she walked down the aisle. Like she was everything. Like she was beautiful. Like she was his salvation, and he was grateful for it. Buck walked beside her, his arms steady, and when they reached the altar, he placed her hand in Lewis's with something like pride. The preacher's words washed over her, traditional phrases about love and commitment and joining 2 lives into one. She barely heard them, All she could see was Louis, his eyes never leaving hers, his hand warm and strong around hers. Then it was time for vows, and Louis spoke first. His voice was rough but clear, carrying through the small church. Luna, I see you, all of you, and I choose you. You woke my dead heart when I thought I'd never feel anything again. You brought light into my darkness. I will spend my life proving your worth to you, even though you're already worth more than I deserve. Luna's tears spilled over. Her own vows came out shaky but sincere. Louis, you stirred my heart when I thought it frozen. You saw me when I was invisible. When I thought I'd never be wanted again, you chose me. I choose you back today and always. You stirred mine first, he whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear, and her breath caught on a sob. By the power vested in me, the preacher said, smiling, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Thornton, you may kiss your bride. Louis cupped her face in both hands, gentle and reverent, and kissed her thoroughly. It was tender but not chaste, claiming her in front of everyone, making it clear this was real and chosen and wanted. When they broke apart, she was flushed and breathless, and the church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, and Luna saw Evelyn Hartwell in a back pew. The older woman's face was pinched, but she nodded stiffly, not approval exactly, but acknowledgement. Luna nodded back and kept walking, her hand in Louis's, her heart so full it hurt. The reception at the ranch was simple but joyful. Tables set up in the yard, food prepared by the ranch wives, fiddle music floating on the afternoon air. Louis danced with her first, holding her close, spinning her under the Colorado sky. Then other men asked respectfully, Buck, Tom, even Mr. Miller. Each dance felt like acceptance, like belonging. As the sun set and guests began drifting away, Luna stood with Louis's arm around her waist, watching families load into wagons. Mrs. Miller hugged her goodbye. You're good for him, she whispered, and he's good for you. That's all a marriage needs. Finally, blessedly, they were alone. The house was quiet. The dishes could wait until morning. Louis led her inside, through the kitchen to their bedroom. Not hers anymore, theirs. She felt her nervousness return, the old self-consciousness about her body creeping in. Louis must have sensed it. He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. Luna, we have all night, all our lives. There's no rush. But his eyes held both hunger and tenderness, promise and patience. Luna took his hand, placed it over her racing heart. He could feel it hammering, feel her fear and desire warring. I'm ready to be yours, she whispered. His kiss was answer enough.